Hi everyone, welcome back to another video. Today we will be talking about newly formed Tropical Storm Erin, which the National Hurricane Center has officially named and classified earlier today at the 11 a.m. advisory. Now, we have been tracking this system as an area of interest. The National Hurricane Center was monitoring very closely to become a tropical cyclone over this last week or so. And now officially it has become a tropical cyclone named Erin. We are now on the E name for the 2025 Atlantic hurricane season. It is at 45 miles per hour, 1,004 millibars, moving, moving west at 20 miles per hour, moving very quickly to the west, due west. And as you can see from the first forecast cone intensity forecast from the National Hurricane Center, it is forecast to reach hurricane status as we get towards the middle and latter part of the work week, particularly as we head towards overnight Wednesday and into Thursday. And then, as you can see, as we get towards the weekend or so, the beginning of the weekend, it looks like it could become our first major hurricane as well, as it gets closer and going a bit north of the Leeward Islands and Puerto Rico and the Virgin Islands. Now, let's take a look at what Tropical Storm Erin currently looks like. And you can see at the right now current satellite loop, it is generally fairly well-organized system with just general strong convection blowing up in and around all over its center and outwards. Now, it will take its time to, obviously gradually intensify, as we just saw looking at the intensity forecast from the Hurricane Center, with where it also is looking to track, it generally moving westward as it continues across the Atlantic. Now, taking a look at the general models, let's take a look. We'll look at the American GFS model first. So let's quickly just change it to the just general North Atlantic so we get a much wider view. And so here's Erin right now. This is a current 12Z run of the GFS model. And as we move forward in time into tomorrow, into Wednesday, you can see the GFS model has it strengthening fairly well and getting down into the 950s or so, and then curving up north and being particularly kind of an out-to-sea system for the U.S., but definitely affecting Bermuda according to the GFS model. Now, and then eventually going further north and out to sea, and then becoming post-tropical eventually as we get towards the end of this weekend to end into next week. Now that's the American model. Now let's take a look at the European model. We'll take a look at the ECAIFS model, because I believe that's the new European model we're using. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that's the case. Now, this model shows a much more gradual strengthening, much weaker system as it continues westward, and then it really shows it intensifying, getting a lot closer to the U.S. East Coast as we get towards particularly Wednesday, Thursday. So it does seem like it moves a lot faster, and obviously because it's a lot weaker, is able to move much further to the west and get much closer to the U.S. eastern seaboard. But it still does not show it making landfall on the U.S. East Coast. However, since it does bring it a much closer to the eastern seaboard of the U.S., it will generate a lot stronger wave action and rip current risks. Now, if we take, and it also does have it intensify quite rapidly once it does get much closer to the U.S. and go much more closely parallel the eastern seaboard, getting it down into the 950s as well. Just like the GFS was showing, just a much more closer to the U.S. type of system. Now, taking a look at the Canadian model, which, let's see what the 12Z run of this model shows. I believe, it's much more in line and somewhat more south of the European, bringing it much further west and a lot closer to the east coast of the U.S., potentially maybe making landfall along the outer banks of North Carolina. But definitely the Canadian and European of the general global models are much more in agreement of it being a lot closer to the U.S. than the GFS is. Now, if we take a look at the actual hurricane models, it does seem, though, that it's only the halves A and halves B models that are showing Erin. So let's take a look, bring this back. This is the 12Z run. It's still coming in for both the half A and half B model, but it is mostly in currently. So let's move this out further in time as we get throughout the rest of this week. It does show it's strengthening and continuing to strengthen as it obviously continues to move due west. But by the time we get to around overnight Thursday into Friday, it does have it as a likely category 3 major hurricane or so, with its pressure being down in the upper 950s there, according to the half A model. Now let's take a look at the half B model, its counterpart. It is also mostly in for the 12Z run. And as we continue to move throughout the rest of this week, it shows it's strengthening quite rapidly, kind of like the half A model. And as we get towards Thursday, Friday, it goes a little bit further than the half A, brings it further into Friday. It does show it dropping into the lower to mid 950s millibar range. So definitely a likely category 3 hurricane or so with that, with how it's looking right now, according to both those models. Now, if we look at what's particularly we should really look at is the general sea surface temperatures it will be trekking across as it continues westward over the Atlantic. Now, so let's just do the North Atlantic, just show the sea surface temperatures. So right now, I believe it's somewhere around here or so. I think somewhere in this area. But as it continues westward, you can see it definitely gets into much warmer, much more favorable sea surface temperatures to sustain a strengthening tropical cyclone, and especially as it gets towards the north of Puerto Rico and the Leeward Islands, the Virgin Islands, as it gets towards the Bahamas and that area, the sea surface temperatures rise dramatically towards 29-30 degrees Celsius, which is plenty warm enough for a tropical cyclone to really intensify and become a lot stronger. So water temperature wise, it will not have really any issue, and shear wise, I really don't believe it will have too much of an issue as well, with how the Hurricane Center is showing it likely strengthening over the next several days. Now, if we lastly just take a look generally at the hurricane season currently up to this point, we have had 5 total systems, all of which have just been tropical storms. However, it has been somewhat kind of deadly, damaging season up to this point, with already 21 total fatalities and damage totaling right now at $61.97 million. Now, particularly, so we have had Andrea form back in like kind of the middle to end of June. Then we had Barry right after that at the end of June. And Chantal, which was our first U.S. landfalling tropical cyclone that really was the one of the more damaging systems along the southeast coast and the Carolinas, forming in the beginning of July. And then we had Dexter at the beginning of August, and now Erin is really what we're currently watching as likely going to be our first major tropical cyclone, major hurricane particularly, our first Cape Verde tropical cyclone, which a lot of the time when we see those systems, they can definitely become very strong and very long-lasting tropical cyclones, as we've seen particularly in these last 7 years or so, 7-8 years. So Barry and Chantal particularly Chantal, have been our 2 mostly damaging and deadly tropical cyclones, but Erin apparently has already killed 7 people, I guess in the Cape Verde area. Damage, we'll see how much damage it really causes depending on how close it gets to the U.S. and really how close it gets to other land masses as it continues its westward track. But for now, Erin has just formed. It is a weak tropical storm right now, but it is forecast to strengthen into a hurricane as we get towards the middle part of the week, and then major hurricane as we get towards this weekend. And particularly as we get towards this weekend, we'll really get to know a lot better of where it really will be tracking and what areas will really be mostly affected and mainly affected by the system. We'll see if the U.S. East Coast really needs to be on higher alert, or if it'll just be a kind of more rip current, a higher swell situation for the eastern seaboard. So hopefully you guys found this video interesting, informative. Tell me, what do you guys think down below in the comment section? What do you guys think? How strong do you think Tropical Storm Erin will become? Do you think it'll peak as a Category 3? Do you think it could get stronger than that? Or do you think it might be weaker? It doesn't even become a major hurricane? Like the video and subscribe for future videos and updates on the storm and throughout the rest of the hurricane season. I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye.